Hello YouTube divers, this is WaterDab122 and I want to welcome you all to a brand new YouTube series of mine. We're going to be doing a new YouTube series called What's on the Turntable, where I take a look at some albums that my dad's vinyl collection by a certain band for that matter, and I briefly talk about them and, show them off. So today we are going to start with my all-time favorite band, Rush. Heck, I'm wearing the shirt today, so you know it's going to be about Rush. So with that said, let's get this freaking started. So we have 8 studio albums plus a compilation album to look at. So without further ado, let's get freaking into it with Archives. Archives came out in 1976, I believe. It was sometime between the releases of Caress of Steel and 2112. And I say that because the first 3 Rush albums are on here. This is a compilation album, and it basically showcases the first 3 Rush albums with the self-titled debut, Fly By Night, and Caress of Steel. So, here's the inside of it. Basically opens up to this vertical type of, hold on just a second, one of the records came out here. There we go. So, basically opens up to this vertical track listing here. The first 2 sides are the debut album. Sides 3 and 4 are Fly By Night, and sides 5 and 6 are Caress of Steel. Of course, the dudes right here on the bottom. Just trying to be careful, that way none of the records fall out. But overall, I love all 3 of these albums here, but I personally like these 2 more. I don't really care for the debut album that much. The debut album's solid debut. Then again, I don't hate any Rush album by any means. So, yeah, Archives, great stuff, even though it's basically like a compilation of their first 3 albums. Still great nonetheless. Great albums to showcase there. Now let's move on to album number 2. 2112 came out in 1976, and there were problems with this album before, upon its release. Before this album, the band released Caress of Steel, which I personally think is an underrated album. But the label, it failed to sell. It failed to sell copies and stuff. It wasn't that commercial for them, and so the label threatened their career. After Caress of Steel, one bad record and you're done for. And the band responded by putting out this masterpiece of an album in 2112. Of course, here are the dudes on the back side. The track listing is right here. Release side 1. The title track, one of the best songs ever written. The story is just phenomenal. I will make an album review for this album on Magic Metal Mondays. Come a couple days from now. But overall, this is a masterpiece. I adore this album. No doubt it was an important album for the band and an important album for me. Really great album. Now let's move on to album number 3. The Pharaoh of the Kings came out in 1977, and like 2112, this is a freaking classic. There's no denying that this album was extremely influential in some way, shape, and form. This is a phenomenal album from start to finish. Yeah, it is a step down from 2112, but still, this is a great album nonetheless. Inside of it here, not really as artistic as 2112 was. I didn't even show you that. I'm sorry. The lyrics are all on this side. Side 1 here, you got a Pharaoh of the Kings and Xanadu, which Xanadu is one of my all-time favorite songs. Not just by Rush, but by anybody, for that matter. Side 2 is a little bit more downward, but except the exceptions of Closer to the Heart and Cygnus X1, which are 2 huge songs for the band, especially the former, where that song basically just blew up on the radio. And Cygnus X1 is just one of those songs where you can listen to again and again, and you just never get tired from it. And again, like with 2112, I will make an album review, and I will talk a little bit more in depth about it there. So with that said, Farewell to Kings. Let's move on to album number 4. Hemispheres. Came out in 1978, and if you've been following my channel for up to this point, then you know. If not, I will tell you. This is not only my favorite Rush album, this is my favorite album of all time. There is absolutely no other record that deserves that title than this one right here. This album is perfect. This album is flawless. This album is just... it's more than a masterpiece. It's more than a classic album. It's more than a highly influential album. This album is just one of those albums where you can listen to from start to finish and never get bored of it. Here's the inside of the record here. And of course, here's the back side with the track listing, the side one, the one song that's on side one. It's my favorite song of all time. I love that song. And then, of course, you have Circumstances, The Trees, and my favorite instrumental of all time, Livia Strangiato. The band is absolutely on another level on this thing. And this is them at their most proggy, their most technical, their most memorable, in my opinion. This is just a perfect record. What more do you want me to say? This album, I never get tired of listening to it. It is just one of those albums where, like I said, it's one of those albums where you could just listen to again and again and never get freaking bored. So yeah, with that said, Hemispheres from 1978, in my opinion, the greatest album ever made. And of course, if you want more information about Hemispheres, I did a album review for it a while ago. I talked about it on my Rush rankings. I talked about it on my top 10 albums video. And I talked about it on my Albums of the Year saga. So now, with that said, Hemispheres is album number 4 here. Moving on to album number 5. Permanent Waves. Came out in 1980. And this album, once again, it is a classic. It is a super strong album. This was them trying to go in a more commercial, radio-friendly type of manner, but it works tremendously on this record. Track listing is up here. Spirit of Radio, Free Will, and Natural Science. All those are classics to this present day. And from here on out, you can only see like the inner sleeve of the record. There's like no booklet type of records here. But overall, Permanent Waves, even though it's a top 10 album for me, I ranked this at number 7 when I did my Rush album rankings, simply because I just liked other Rush albums more. But I love this record. It's amazing. What more do you want me to say? I don't really think it's a masterpiece like many people say it is. Like, there are some weaker moments on the album, but I will make an album review for Permanent Waves, and I'll talk a little bit more about it there. But still, a great album from start to finish. Permanent Waves. Let's move on to album number 6. Moving Pictures. Came out in 1981, and now this is a freaking classic. There is no denying it. Many Rush fans have this at the top of their list. I totally understand why. This, from top to bottom, this is a freaking flawless album. With side 1 alone, with Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, and Limelight, you know it's going to be a freaking good record. There's no inner sleeve for this album. I don't know why, but like here, you only just see the record. There's no inner sleeve, which is kind of weird, but I guess it works. And then of course, on the back here, and a little bit interesting thing about the album cover. The picture for the cover took place in a building, at a building in Canada off of Grosvenor Street. And for those of you who don't know, Grosvenor is my last name. And just found it a little bit of a coincidence that this was shot on a building on Grosvenor Street. So yeah, this album gives me great memories, and it also ties in a little bit of a coincidence with me. I love this record. Um, Great album from start to finish. So with that said, Moving Pictures is album number 6 that we're looking at here. Let's move on to album number 7. Signals came out in 1982, and this is where the band started to flirt with the synths, like the synthesizer. This was their first album of the synth era, and they basically changed direction a little bit here. My dad saw them on this tour. He saw them on the Moving Pictures and Exit Stage Left tours, respectively, and then he went on this tour. This is a freaking amazing album. Easily my favorite album from the synth era of Rush. The inner sleeve looks like this. Probably the best one they have. That's just my opinion. But overall, this album is just amazing from start to finish. The synthesizers, the production has a cool icy tone. The guitar tones just sound so shallow and so sharp, and for some reason I like that a lot. Geddy Lee's voice, one of my favorite vocal performances from him, is on this album. In my opinion, this is a solid album from start to finish. I mean, heck, it has freaking Subdivisions on here, which is one of the best Rush songs of all time. But my favorite song on this album is Losing It. Beautiful track. Analog Kid and Digital Man are both insane. Once again, I will make an album review for Signals on Magic Metal Mondays, and I'll talk a little bit more about it there. And if you did notice, I'm wearing the Signals shirt for today. As you can tell, I love this record. So with that said, Signals is here at number 7, and we've got 2 more records to review. Let's go on to album number 8. Grace Under Pressure came out in 1984, and this was when Rush really started to, they went full synth on this album, drawing out a lot of their new wave influences, like the Police and some new wave bands of the sort. But overall, I know a lot of Rush fans, or at least a lot of 70s Rush fans, don't think this is a really good album. I mean, heck, my dad was never really into this album. The only reason why he bought this was to, give it more and more chances. It never grew on him, but I really enjoy this album. I don't think it's as good as the albums they put out in the 70s, except for the debut album. But overall, this album has a lot of strong songs like Distant Early Warning and Between the Wheels, which was for a long time my favorite Rush song. And Red Sector A is also really cool. After Image is a great song. But overall, I really think Grace Under Pressure is a strong album. I don't think it's as good as say Signals, for example, but I do think it is one of the better albums from the synth era. And with that said, we got one more album to review, so let's talk about it. Hold Your Fire came out in 1987, and this is, in my opinion, the weakest Rush album that my dad has in his collection, and I'm sure, and my dad also agrees with me on that. The only reason why he bought this album on vinyl was because of the second song on here. I'll try and right there, Time Stands Still, which is one of the best Rush songs ever written. Very, very, very amazing track. And of course, Force 10 is on this album. I love Force 10. It's a great song. Mission is also on here. I love Mission. And Prime Mover is also a really great song. Lock and Key is nice. But overall, Hold Your Fire is a really strong release. I love this album. Or at least I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. I think it's a pretty cool album. So with that said, that is all the Rush albums that my dad has on vinyl. And now we are going to go ahead and rank them in the order that I feel about them. And this will also pay back to the Rush ranking that I did on Magic Metal Mondays a couple months ago. So, from weakest to greatest, excluding archive, well, including archives for that matter. Um, Number 9 is Hold Your Fire. Number 8 is Grace Under Pressure. Number 7 is Archives. Number 6. Hold on a second. Yeah, number 6 is Permanent Waves. Let's see. Number 5 is A Pharaoh of the Kings. And number 4 is Signals. Number 3 is Moving Pictures. Number 2 is 2112. And finally, number 1, which you already know at this point, Hemispheres, greatest album ever made. So with that said, that concludes this edition of What's on the Turntable. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.